in Silicon Valley, things do move very quickly. And one of the reasons they move quickly is because there is this sort of insatiable sense of prototyping. The idea of trying to get the ideas out of your head and onto the road. I think under the leadership of Secretary Foxx, this is exactly the theme that has been permeating some of the department's successes. This idea of getting out there and prototyping, of having the big vision, but then being able to take these first steps in a concrete way so that people can see it and understand it. Now, in Silicon Valley, you hear the term moonshot all the time. It's become nearly synonymous with innovation. This is our moonshot. But for those of you who are fans of The Princess Bride, it brings to mind the words of Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, right? The moonshot is often taken to mean this huge leap. And in fact, the moonshot was transformative in terms of what it did. And when you think about what that did for science, for technology, for establishing US leadership in these fields, it was amazing. But I don't think that's the lesson. The lesson that I think is important in the moonshot is that this was a series of very carefully executed steps that led to this. And in fact, when Kennedy announced that we would put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, to have the courage to say, you know, we're not going to be able to build that spacecraft immediately. We're going to have to go through the whole Gemini program. Go from a one-person capsule with Mercury to 2 people with Gemini, where we can begin to practice some of these maneuvers, where we can build larger rockets. Then eventually we'll move on to Apollo. And this inherent ability to move forward, even when you had tragedies like Apollo 1, to say we're going to learn from that and we're going to move forward. This is an amazing accomplishment. And so the idea of the moonshot wasn't, in my mind, that it was a moonshot, but it was a sustained series of prototypes, a way of engaging stakeholders that led to this ultimate success. What could we do if all vehicles could communicate with each other? Now again, that's a big picture dream, and getting every vehicle on the road to communicate with every other vehicle and every pedestrian is a huge challenge. There's a temptation in the light of those challenges to say, well, you know, that looks too hard. So how do you get people to understand this concept? How do you get to move towards that? Again, it's through prototyping. How do we get some of this technology out on the road today in a way in which it can really do good and we can learn from it? So let me give you a few examples of how these prototypes are working. So in New York City, the focus is really on intersection safety. And instead of trying to make sure that every vehicle has this capability, the idea is to start off with vehicles that frequently travel Midtown Manhattan and central Brooklyn. So looking at things like taxi cabs, buses, commercial delivery trucks, and other vehicles that the city owns. What's interesting is this is a mixture of both public and private vehicles. Vehicles that are often in this area. So start with who are going to be the heaviest users. And then start with installing the vehicle to roadside infrastructure at really some of the most high accident rate arterials. Where are these collisions taking place? Where would the greatest benefit be? Let's focus there first. Tampa is taking a slightly different approach. So there, one of the big issues is congestion. And so the question is, how can these vehicle communication technologies be used to ease congestion while at the same time improving safety? And so there, instead of focusing on intersections, they're focusing on a series of reversible express lanes and 3 major arterials that connect to this. And so there's really a traffic flow sense going through this whole proposal, looking at what happens with queuing during the morning peak hours, eliminating things like wrong way entry into these reversible lanes, being able to use bus rapid transit signal priority so that you can get buses through quickly, and that becomes a more viable means of commuting for people. So there's a lot of coordination aspects there. What are we doing in Wyoming? In fact, looking at weather-related safety. And so this is another project looking at fleet vehicles, and in particular, commercial trucks, to equip these with sensors to be able to measure what's going on in the roads and then radio that information out. And so the desire is to instrument not only things that may belong to the Department of Transportation and local agencies like snowplows in emergency vehicles, but also maintenance vehicles and private trucks that belong to trucking fleets, to be able to share information about the weather conditions that they're encountering. This is a corridor of highway that has an awful lot of weather-related accidents. And so the intention here is to, in a measurable way, reduce both the frequency and severity of those accidents. This is a prototype. It's a first step, but it's one that enables an awful lot of innovation and enables an awful lot of learning.